Greetings, one and all. Sorry, I had to look at the camera because I have a new camera now. So, everything should be up and going. It looks like all the audio's fine. I'm trying to do a whole new setup here, obviously other than the background. But this is Exploring Arda, a Tolkien podcast where I, Jackson, am your host, and I'll be reading through a bunch of Tolkien's works other than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So, from the last recording and the last post that I made for the show was a month and a half ago or so, somewhere around there. It's been a long time since I did it, only because I had a lot of stuff. Like, after I last posted all the way in May, I think the 2 weeks into May, was the last time I posted. But a lot happened because I don't have the book with me right now. I really should. Actually, I do. So I'll probably reach for it on the end of the episode to talk about my book that I published called The Lands of Ordia. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the episode because I know that you guys want to go into the Silmarillion, because that is what I've started with, is the Silmarillion. And we've gone through a lot of chapters, we've gone through some characters and whatnot, and so I'm so stoked to finally just be back at it again, now that I've published my book, and I've finished college. So that was a really, really big time commitment, obviously. So I actually did get a bachelor's in English and creative writing, as well as a little bit of literature kind of sprinkled in there. But yeah, it was a lot, and it was the last few weeks, and that's why I have not posted anything. And I did post on Drink and Dried, which is my other podcast that I do with my friend Angel, but I either had to do that one or my Tolkien one, so I had to cut out one. But with everything kind of being sort of caught up, now we can go back into the story again. And since it's been so long, I didn't even remember where we left off. I think it was the whole death of Fëanor, or Fëanor. I've kind of heard a new pronunciation of his name, and it makes more sense. I don't really pronounce the first A, the only A in Fëanor. So I'm gonna try to pronounce it Fëanor the best that I can. But we'll kind of see how that goes, because I'm kind of forgetful like that. But so I'm reading chapter 14 and 15 because they're both pretty short. The first one is called Of Beleriand and Its Realms, and if I flip fast enough to the other chapter, chapter 15 is Of the Noldor in Beleriand. So pretty much we're going to be talking about all of the lands of Beleriand in these two chapters, and I thought, since they're a few pages each, might as well just tackle them at the same time. So I'm actually really excited to be back again. So and yeah, also, and thanks to everybody who has watched any of this or listened to it, because I've been uploading all my old episodes first to get caught up until now. So got all the new camera, the new setup. Hopefully it's good. So now now we can do chapter 14, and hopefully I will be able to narrate well. Here we go. This is the fashion of the lands into which the Noldor came in the north of the western regions of Middle-earth in the ancient days. And here also is told of the manner in which the chieftains of the Eldar held their lands in the leaguer upon Morgoth, after the Dagor Aglareb, the third battle in the Wars of Beleriand. In the north of the world, I already messed up. In the north of the world, Melkor had in the ages past reared Ered Engren, the Iron Mountains, as a fence to his citadel of Utumno, and they stood upon the borders of the regions of everlasting cold, in a great curve from east to west. Behind the walls of Ered Engren in the west, where they bent back northwards, Melkor built another fortress as a defense against assault that might come from Valinor. And when he came back to Middle-earth, as has been told, he took up his abode in the endless dungeons of Angband, the Hells of Iron, for in the War of the Powers the Valar, in their haste to overthrow him in the great stronghold of Utumno, did not wholly destroy Angband, nor search out all its deep places. Beneath Ered Engren he made a great tunnel which issued south of the mountains, and there he made a mighty gate. But above this gate, and behind it even to the mountains, he piled the thunderous towers of Thangorodrim, that were made of the ash and slag of his subterranean furnaces, and the vast refuge of his tunnelings. They were black and desolate and exceedingly lofty, and smoke issued from their tops, dark and foul, upon the northern sky. Before the gates of Angband, filth and desolation spread southward for many miles over the wide plain of Ardgallen. But after the coming of the sun, rich grass arose there, and while Angband was besieged and its gates shut, there were green things even among the pits and broken rocks before the doors of hell. Alright, cool. Alright, so a little quick kind of rehash little summary here. We get the little introduction that although Beleriand is a very lush and amazing place by now, of course Melkor has to come in and, kind of do his own thing, and even though he still has a Tumno, he still raises up Thangorodrim, so he has kind of two fortresses, and the whole land of Angband is also kind of his. For me, it kind of references to him a lot. And then, of course, the thunderous towers of Thangorodrim spewing forth, smog and clouds and ash all into the sky. It's a really menacing and ominous picture. And of course, it's like the greatest stronghold for any sort of fantasy villain. I would say probably that. So it's really cool. So we get a little kind of introduction to that for this chapter at least. So let's get back to the reading. To learn more. To the west of Thangorodrim lay Hissalome. There you go. Yeah, I'm struggling. The land of mist. For so it was named by the Noldor in their own tongue because of the clouds that Morgoth sent thither during their first encampment. Hithlum it became in the tongue of the Sindar that dwelt in those regions. It was a fair land while the siege of Angband lasted, although its air was cool in winter there was cold. In the west it was bounded by Ered Lomin, the echoing mountains that marched near the sea, and in the east and south by the great curve of Ered Wethrin, the shadowy mountains, that looked across Ardgallen and the Vale of Sirion. Fingolfin and Fingon, his son, held Hithlum, and the most part of Fingolfin's folk dwelt in Mithrim, about the shores of the Great Lake. To Fingon was assigned Dor Lomin, that lay in the west of the mountains of Mithrim. But their chief fortress was at Ithel Sirion, in the east of Ered Wethrin, whence they kept watch upon Ardgallen, and their cavalry rode upon that plain even to the shadow of Thangorodrim. For from few their horses had increased swiftly, and the grass of Ardgallen was rich and green. Of those horses many of the sires came from Valinor, and they were given to Fingolfin by Maedhros in atonement of his losses, for they had been carried by ship to Losgard. Really cool. Actually, yeah, that's a really cool thing too. So pretty much Fingolfin and Fingon kind of get assigned their own piece of the land, so to speak. Really cool stuff. I really love Fingolfin, and obviously Fingon's really cool too. And Maedhros has another appearance here, being kind of generous. I would say probably generous in a way. But yeah, pretty much they get their own lands to keep watch on all of Melkor's places that are nearby, which is a really good idea, especially when it comes to Fingolfin. So he knows what's up. He knows what he has to face. So back at it again here. West of Dor Lomin, beyond the echoing mountains which south of the Firth of Drengist marched inland, lay Neverest, that signifies the hither shore in the Sindarin tongue. That name was given at first to all the coastlands south of the Firth, but afterwards only to the lands whose shore lay between Drengist and Mount Taras. There for many years was the realm of Turgon the Wise, son of Fingolfin, bounded by the sea, and by Ered Lumin, and by the hills which continued the walls of Ered Wethrin southward, from Ivrin to Mount Taras, which stood upon a promontory. By some Neverest was held to belong rather to Beleriand than to Hithlum, for it was milder land, watered by the wet winds from the sea, and sheltered from the cold north winds that blew over Hithlum. It was a hollow land, surrounded by mountains and great coast cliffs higher than the plains behind, and no river flowed thence. And there was a great mere in the midst of Neverest, with no certain shores, being encircled by wide marshes. Lenawin was the name of that mere. because of the multitude of birds that dwelt there, of such as love tall reeds and shallow pools. At the coming of the Noldor, many of the great elves lived in Nevras near to the coast, and especially about Mount Taras in the southwest, for to that place Ulmo and Ose had been wont to come in days of old. All that people took Turgon for their lord, and the mingling of the Noldor and the Sindar came to pass soonest there. And Turgon dwelt long in those halls that he named Vinyamar, under Mount Taras beside the sea. So everybody really loves this Mount Taras. It's a very plentiful, rich place. Really cool stuff. A lot of people decide to kind of make their home over there, especially, what was it? The Noldor, yes. The Grey Elves, yeah. Grey Elves, sorry. Any of the Grey Elves. They loved their mountain, apparently. Yeah, I think like these chapters are a lot of like places like a lot of the elves are just like, we like it here and we like it there, and this is our leader and he's their leader, and what was it? Turgon is the guy who is, I guess, appointed leader in the Mount Taras area. So interesting, I guess. So Turgon, the son of Fingolfin. So I mean, really, Fingolfin expands his personal land, I guess, over this way because like it's his son, so I'm assuming he has good connections with him. For now, you never know. Especially with the Silmarillion. Back to it again here. South of Ardgallen, the great highland named Dorthonion stretched for 60 leagues from east to west. Yeah, west to east. Sorry, I mixed it up there. Doesn't really matter anyway. Great pine forests it bore, especially on its northern and western sides. By gentle slopes from the plain it rose to a bleak and lofty land, where lay many tarns at the feet of bare tors whose head were higher than the peaks of arid Wethrin. But southward, where it looked toward Doriath, it fell suddenly in dreadful precipices. From the northern slopes of Dorthonion, Angrod and Agnor, sons of Finarfin, looked out over the fields of Ardgallen, and were the vassals of their brother Finrod, lord of Nargothrond. Their people were few, for the land was barren, and the great highlands behind were deemed to be a bulwark that Morgoth would not likely seek to cross. Between Dorthonion and the shadowy mountains there was a narrow vale, whose sheer walls were clad with pines, but the vale itself was green, for the river Sirion flowed through it, hastening towards Beleriand. Finrod held the pass of Sirion, and upon the isle of Tol Sirion, in the midst of the river, he built a mighty watchtower, Minas Tirith. But after Nargothrond was made, he committed that fortress mostly to the keeping of Orodreth, his brother. Yeah. Minas Tirith. That sounds kind of familiar, right? Yeah. So see these little details that I've missed, like the second or third time, just glanced over probably because it's like, okay, well, yeah, these guys are part of this land and that land, but Minas Tirith made by Finrod, which is that goes back. That's a history, definitely. Another cool thing about this book, hopefully I can get it on camera this time, is that it has a really cool map that you can always kind of go back on. And yeah, for me, I really love maps. Without a map, what is a fantasy book without a map? I mean, obviously there is more, but it just kind of gives more in depth. And like when you get to this stuff, it's like literally 2 whole chapters of like who gets what land. So, yeah. So I guess we'll just go back to it again. Now the great and fair country of Beleriand lay on either side of the mighty river Sirion, renowned in song, which rose at Ithel Sirion and skirted the edge of Ardgallen ere he plunged through the pass, becoming ever fuller with the streams of the mountains. Thus he flowed south for 130 leagues, gathering the waters in many tributaries, until with the mighty flood he reached his many mouths in sandy delta in the bay of Balar. And following Sirion from north to south, there lay upon the right hand in West Beleriand the forest of Brethil, between Sirion and Teglin, and then the realm of Nargothrond, between Teglin and Narog. And the river Narog rose in the falls of Ivrin in the southern face of Dorlamine, and flowed some 80 leagues ere he joined Sirion in Nantathrin, the land of willows. South of Nantathrin, there you go, was a region of meads filled with many flowers, where few folk dwell. And beyond lay the marshes and isles of reed about the mouths of Sirion, and the sands of his delta empty of all living things save birds of the sea. So, did you guys get all that? When I'm reading this, it's just it's not like confusing, it's just a lot to unpack, I suppose. And this moment, I guess, is just kind of like, okay, well, this is how Tolkien is very, very specific of like his geography, which I love. I'm not really complaining about this because I wish I could be able to describe my own land like that. Obviously, I can't because in my novel it's a lot more, adventure-y themed. So you can't go into like, oh, this is a river with like 10 tributaries and it empties on this river and has that plain and that's one's the land of the willows. I get it. That if it was a lot like that in Lord of the Rings, it would be a lot longer of a series. So I kind of get that, at least aspect of it. I do kind of get that Sirion is obviously the main river here, and at the very bottom, the marsh, like the more marshes there are, it's a lot less habitable. That's kind of what I got out of it. So back to it here. But the realm of Nargothrond extended also west of Narog to the river Nenning, that reached the sea at Eglarest, and Finrod became the overlord of all the elves of Beleriand between Sirion and the sea, save only in the Phallus. There dwelt those of the Sindar who still loved ships, and Círdan, the shipbuilder, was their lord. But between Círdan and Finrod there was friendship and alliance, and with the aid of the Noldor, the havens of Brithambar and Eglarest were built anew. Behind their great walls they became fair towns and harbors with quays and piers of stone. Upon the cape west of Eglarest, Finrod raised the tower of Barad Nimras to watch the western sea, though needlessly as it proved. For at no time ever did Morgoth essay to build ships or to make war by sea. Water all his servants shunned, and to the sea none would willingly go nigh, save in dire need. With the aid of the elves of the havens, some of the folk of Nargothrond built new ships, and they went forth and explored the great isle of Belar, thinking there to prepare a last refuge if evil came. But it was not their fate that they should ever dwell there. Thus the realm of Finrod was the greatest by far. Sorry, a little distracted here. Though he was the youngest of the great lords of the Noldor, Fingolfin, Fingon, and Maedhros, and Finrod Felagund. But Fingolfin was held overlord of all the Noldor, and Fingon after him, though their own realm was but the northern land of Hithlum. Yet their people were the most hardy and valiant, most feared by the orcs, and most hated by Morgoth. Really cool stuff, too. So yeah, these elves are pretty much perched out by the coast, and they start building ships because they know that Morgoth and his minions and his servants of evil, they don't like water. So they would never be able to, well, I mean, they would be able to, but they just don't want to. That's kind of like the main point of this. Morgoth and his little buddies, they don't like water at all. I think partially because of Ulmo and Ossé, because they are kind of dangerous, but also because the whole thing of like orcs fearing water, and I kind of like draw inspiration that that water is everything. Well, not everything, but water is pretty much pure and living memory. I think that was like something that the elves said that the water is that it holds no memory. So like if you get washed away into sea, that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be forgotten. So that whole fear of the ocean is, understandable, I suppose. But yeah, and then obviously the whole thing of like Fingon and Fingolfin having like this huge realm, but they're actually like friendly. They're one of the friendly elves that are just like, yeah, you can have this region and that region. So yeah, so we'll get back to it here. Upon the left hand of Sirion lay East Beleriand, at its widest 100 leagues from Sirion to Gelion, and the borders of Osiriand, and first between Sirion and Mindeb lay the empty land of Dimbar under the peaks of the Crissaegrim, abode of eagles. Between Mindeb and the upper waters of Iskaldwin lay the no land of Dungortha. There you go. I can read. And that region was filled with fear, for upon its one side the power of Melian faced the north march of Doriath, but upon the other side the sheer precipices of arid Gorgoroth, mountains of terror, fell down from high Dorthonion. Thither, as was earlier told, Ungoliant had fled from the whips of the Balrogs, and there she dwelt a while, filling the ravines with her deadly gloom. And there still, when she passed away, her foul offspring lurked, and wove their evil nets, and the thin waters that spilled from arid Gorgoroth was defiled, and perilous to drink. For the hearts of those that tasted them were filled with shadows of madness and despair. All living things else shunned that land, and the Noldor would pass through Nan Dungorthab only at great need, by paths near to the borders of Doriath and furthest from the haunted hills. That way was made long before, in the time ere Morgoth returned to Middle-earth, and if one fared upon it, he came eastward to Escalduin, where still there stood in the days of the siege the stone bridge of Aint Ayur. Thence he passed through Dor Dinen, the silent land, and crossing the Arosiak, which signifies the fords of Eros, came to the north marches of Beleriand, where dwelt the sons of Feanor. I think I pronounced most of it right. I hope so. Okay, so, So we get another mention of Ungoliant, and you guys know me and Ungoliant. I absolutely love discussing anything about that. One of my favorite, dark entities of the Ardian universe, I suppose. I don't know if you'd call it a universe or not, but, what else am I supposed to call it? And it's my show, so... Yeah, so this whole arid Gorgoroth, I'm assuming a lot of people are familiar with it because it's actually on the Middle-earth map, where it's more signified as a region, and I think it just says Gorgoroth on it. I think I have a map up there, and yeah, it just says Gorgoroth on it. And yeah, Ungoliant was pretty much there at a time, and that's how Shelob came to be, pretty much, because she's the whole thing, spawn of Ungoliant, which makes sense why she would stay there, because of the whole thing of hearts turning into shadows of madness and despair. So obviously everybody is going to avoid that place unless at the greatest need, as it says. And it only makes sense that Sauron is the one who kind of takes Mordor as his land, because that's kind of what it is. It's just despair, and it says that it's the haunted hills. I really like that description, even though it's short. You kind of get the gist of it. It's filled with despair. It has all these living nightmares, pretty much, living shadows, I suppose, that just kind of seep into you and make you go evil. So, yeah, interesting. So, sorry, I had a little itch there to scratch, but now we're gonna go back to it again. So, southward lay the guarded woods of Doriath, abode of Thingol the Hidden King, into whose realm none passed save by his will. Its northern and lesser part, the forest of Neldoreth, was bounded east and south by the dark river Escalduin, which bent westward in the midst of the land, and between Eros and Escalduin lay the denser and greater woods of Region. Upon the southern bank of Escalduin, where it turned westward towards Sirion, where the caves of Menegroth and all Doriath lay east of Sirion, save for a narrow region of woodland between the meeting of Teglin and Sirion and the Meres of Twilight. By the people of Doriath this wood was called Nivrim, the West March. Great oak trees grew there, and it was also encompassed within the girdle of Melian, that so some portion of Sirion, which she loved in reverence of Ulmo, should be wholly under the power of Thingol. So yeah, we get another callback to Thingol. I don't know why I said Thing. Oh, Fingon. Yeah, sorry. Thingol. There you go. So Thingol and his land of Doriath and Melian, which is a short chapter early on in the book, where it's just kind of an introduction of their land, and then obviously this is kind of a recap of they're still there, and pretty much he's known as the Hidden King because he just never leaves his place. So really cool though, the Hidden King. I kind of like that title. Pretty cool. Alright, back to it here. In the southwest of Doriath, where Eros flowed into Sirion, lay great pools and marshes on either side of the river, which halted there in his course and strayed in many channels. That region was named Aelin Uial. I That's a tough one. The Twilight Maris, for they were wrapped in mists, and the enchantment of Doriath lay over them. Now all the northern part of Beleriand sloped southward to this point, and then for a while was plain, and the flood of Sirion was stayed. But south of Aelin Uiel, the land fell suddenly and steeply. All the lower fields of Sirion were divided from the upper fields by this fall, which, to one looking from the south northward, appeared as an endless chain of hills running from Eglaris beyond Narog in the west to Ammon Arab in the east, within far sight of Galion. Narog came through these hills in a deep gorge and flowed over rapids, but had no fall, and on its westward bank the land rose into the great wooded highlands of Tar and Ferath. On the west side of the gorge, where the short and foaming stream Ringwill tumbled headlong into Narog from the high Ferath, Finrod established Nargothrond. But some 25 leagues east of the gorge of Nargothrond, Sirion fell from the north in a mighty fall below the Maris, and then he plunged suddenly underground into great tunnels that the weight of his falling waters delved. And he issued again 3 leagues southward into great noise and smoke through rocky arches at the foot of the hills which were called the Gates of Sirion. Wow, okay, so we got another paragraph here, and then I'll take a little break because, wow, that's a lot of names, and it's a lot of stuff where it's just like, yeah, you can just look at a map, and you don't have to describe it, just look at the map, and you're good. This is kind of me right now. Maybe it's just because I'm exhausted, but maybe that's just kind of like my own personal opinion of this chapter. This dividing fall was named Andrum, the Long Wall, from Nargothrond to Ramdell, the wall's end in East Beleriand. But in the east it became ever less sheer, for the Vale of Galion sloped steadily southward, and Galion had neither fall nor rapids throughout this course, but was ever swifter than was Sirion. Between Ramdell and Galion there stood a single hill of great extent and gentle slopes, but seeming mightier than it was, for it stood alone, and that hill was named Ammon Arab. Upon Ammon Arab died Denethor, lord of the Nandor that dwelt in Osiriand, who marched to the aid of Thingol against Morgoth in those days when the orcs first came down in force, and broke the starlit peace of Beleriand. And upon that hill Majos dwelt after the great defeat. But south of the Andrum, between Sirion and Galion, was a wild land of tangled forest, in which no folk went. There you go. Save here and there a few dark elves wandering. Tar Im Duinath, it was named, the forest between the rivers. Yeah, a lot of a lot of talking today for me, especially a lot of like hard pronounced words. Like reading it's something different when you're trying to like pronounce it the first time, and it's a fantasy name, fantasy language. It's definitely a lot harder. So if you guys want to try to read through this chapter for like the first time and go to this chapter for all of the names, it's a little difficult. So obviously this is all about rivers and whatnot, and all different realms, and apparently this space between Sirion and Galion is pretty much like a dark, twisted forest, which is actually pretty cool. Even though the dark elves are pretty much there most of the time, but it's still like visually. I think that would be a really cool like painting or something like that. Or, I don't know. That's just the way that I think. I suppose I can't paint it. So if anybody guys, if any of you guys want to paint Tar Im Duinath, the forest between the rivers, that would be really cool. I would love to see that. So we're just going to go back into the story, because I have nothing else to say. Galion was a great river, and he rose in 2 sources and had at first 2 branches. Little Galion, that came from the hill of Himring, and Greater Galion, that came from Mount Rerir. Rerir, that's a very... Rerir. From the meeting of his arms, he flowed south for 40 leagues before he found his tributaries. Before he found the sea, he was twice as long as Sirion, though less wide and full. For more rain fell in Hithlum and Dorthonion, whence Sirion drew his waters, than in the east. From Ered Luin flowed the 6 tributaries of Galion. Asgar, that was after named Rathloriel, Thalos, Legolin, Brilthor, there you go, Dwylwen, and Enderant, swift and turbulent streams, falling steeply from the mountains. And between Asgard in the north and Adarant in the south, and between Gelion and Ered Luin lay the far green country of Osiriand, the land of 7 rivers. Now at a point nearly midway in its course, the stream of Adarant divided and then joined again, and the island that its waters enclosed was named Tol Galen, the Green Isle. There Beren and Luthien dwelt after their return. In Osiriand dwelt the Green Elves, in the protection of their rivers, for after Sirion Ulmo loved Gelion above all the waters of the western world. The woodcraft of the elves of Osiriand was such that a stranger might pass through their land from end to end and see none of them. They were clad in green in spring and summer, and the sound of their singing could be heard even across the waters of Gelion. Wherefore the Noldor named that country Lindon, the land of music, and the mountains beyond they named Arid Lindon, for they first saw them from Osiriand. Alright, cool. Excuse me. So yeah, wow. Okay, so yeah, Osiriand, I knew that I always really loved Osiriand because of these elves, of these green elves. And obviously, Ulmo is, like, he loves this area because it has so many rivers and has a lot of water, so I guess that only makes sense. I just really love the whole vibe of Osiriand. The whole thing of them, like, if a stranger passed through, they have a chance of never seeing a single one of them, because I guess that's just how involved they are in nature. I want to have a better word for that, but I don't. they're so close to nature that they just dress like nature. The whole trees, leaves, the greenery, all that stuff. It's amazing, and I absolutely love it. And if anything, I would love to visit Osiriand, especially with the environment, the rivers, the hills, the trees, anything. I would absolutely love that. So if anybody wants to paint something for me, paint Osiriand, I would absolutely love that. Alright, so back to it here. East of Dorthonion, the marches of Beleriand were most open to attack, and only hills of no great height guarded the Vale of Gelion from the north. In that region, upon the march of Maedhros, in the lands behind, dwelt the sons of Feanor, with many people, and their riders passed often over the vast northern plain, Lothlin, the wide and empty, east of Ardgalen, lest Morgoth should attempt any sortie towards East Beleriand. The chief citadel of Maedhros was upon the hill of Himring, the ever-cold, and that was wide-shouldered, bare of trees, and flat upon its summit, surrounded by many lesser hills. Between Himring and Dorthonion there was a pass, exceeding steep upon the west, and that was the pass of Aglon, and was a gate unto Doriath, and a bitter wind blew ever through it from the north. But Celegorm and Curufin fortified Aglon, and held it with great strength, and all the land of Himlad, southward between the river Aros that rose in Dorthonion and his tributary Kelon, that came from Himring. You know what, I'm just going to finish it out, guys, because I only have a few paragraphs left, and we're not going to do chapter 15, because this was a lot longer than I thought it would be, so we'll do chapter 15 another day. Between the arms of Gelion was the ward of Maglor, and here in one place the hills failed altogether. There it was that the orcs came into East Beleriand before the third battle. Therefore the Noldor held a strength of cavalry in the plains of that place, and the people of Caranthir fortified the mountains to the east of Maglor's Gap. There Mount Rerir, and upon it many lesser heights, stood out from the main range of Ered Lindon westward, and in the angle between Rerir and Ered Lindon there was a lake, shadowed by mountains on all sides save the south. That was Lake Heliborn, deep and dark, and beside it Caranthir had his abode. But all the great land between Gelion and the mountains, and between Rerir and the river Asgar, was called by the Noldor Thargelion, which signifies the land beyond Gelion, or Dor Caranthir, the land of Caranthir. And it was here that the Noldor first met the dwarves. But Thargelion was before called by the Grey Elves Talith Runin, the East Vale. Excuse me, guys. Thus the sons of Feanor under Maedhros were the lords of East Beleriand, but their people were in that time mostly in the north of the land, and southward they rode only to hunt in the greenwoods. But there Amrod and Amras had their abode, and they came seldom northward while the siege lasted. And there also other of the elf lords would ride at times, even from afar, for the land was wild but very fair. Of these Finrod Felagond came most often, for he had great love of wandering, and he came even into Assyrian, and won the friendship of the green elves. But none of the Noldor went ever over Eredlindon, where their realm lasted, and little news and late came into Beleriand of what passed in the regions of the east. Wow, okay, now that is the end of chapter 14. We just pretty much get more descriptions of some other locations, more rivers and hills that eventually some of the orcs get into the East Beleriand part before the third battle. What else was there? Oh yeah, the Citadel Maedhros on Himring, the Evercold, which is not for me. Definitely not there. But pretty much just more rivers and stuff. And that Finrod tries to go into... Well, he does go into Assyrian and befriends the Green Elves, which is really cool. The more alliances and friendships, the better. That's what I say. And yeah, I guess that's kind of the end of the chapter. I did want to do 14 and 15, but I realized if I did 15, it would be over an hour, most likely. I kind of forgot how long these chapters take sometimes. So apologies for that. We will do chapter 15 next time, definitely. So the overarching theme of this chapter is that there's a lot of nature. Beleriand is a very big place. I think it's like I think if I remember the maps, like the whole map correctly, it's like the whole size of Middle Earth, pretty much. So there's a lot of history, and that means there's a lot of environment. There's a lot of nature, and he just pretty much just dumps it all in this chapter. He's just like, look at these rivers, look at these hills, look at these mountains. They're really cool, and here's the historic part of it. And most of it, well, I should say almost all of it, is from like the viewpoint of the elves, until like the last part of that chapter where they're like, oh yeah, this is where they meet the dwarves, and that's all you really get from it, which is interesting. But I mean, the Silmarillion is kind of like told from like more elven viewpoint, I would say. A lot of it's just like, oh yeah, in the Sindar tongue it's this, in the Noldor tongue it's this. So it's all about like what the elves call the land and regions and rivers, all that stuff. So yeah, if you guys got through this chapter, I applaud you. It's a very tough chapter to get through, and it's a interesting episode to come back for after almost 2 months. It's like, hey guys, I'm back after 2 months, and you want to know some landscape? You want to know some environment? I actually wasn't expecting that, so yeah, interesting. So I do have my book here, but I just don't want to make anything full, because that's what happened last time, and I think I got it, actually. Okay, sorry, I didn't prepare this last time, or before the episode was here, but now that I have visual aspect for you guys, I have with me my fantasy book. So that's where I'm trying to focus it here. So this is the Lands of Ordia. So yes, that is my book. Definitely inspired by Tolkien and Lord of the Rings mostly. I do have a map, because you know me and my map. Hold on, I can never center these things. So if you guys want to actually see, the thing is, I have a new camera, but it doesn't focus. So the one thing that you can do is that you can head over to Amazon and look up the Lands of Ordia. Yeah, there it goes. The Lands of Ordia. And snag a copy and read the first book. This is a first book out of a 5-book fantasy series. And it has magic, it has adventure, it has battles, all sorts of stuff. I try to incorporate some lore, some history into it as well, because after all, I'm doing a whole thing about the Silmarillion, and all of Tolkien's works, like that is a whole expansion of what he created, history, lore, even short stories, all that stuff. So you guys can tell what kind of influence I have. So if that intrigues you, yeah, pretty much just head over to Amazon, the Lands of Ordia. I think it's like $18 for the $18 for the paperback, because it is a 600-page book, and it is 1 out of 5. So like each book is going to be roughly around that length, if not longer. So very cool. And actually, as a little closing, I'm going to read what this says on the back, so that if you guys aren't quite sold yet, maybe this will intrigue you a little bit. So here it goes. Lands of Ordia, Power of Heaven, Book 1. When Jarel and his friend Corvin discover a mysterious enchanted gem, they learn from an elven lord, Sirvin, that not only was it crafted by the Olumnar, the immortals of Ordia, but there are 3 more with similar power. These stones are the key to protecting the earth against the oncoming darkness, as they equal the powers of all 3 immortals when combined. It is up to Jarel to find the other gems in order to restore peace and light in a world engulfed in strife and looming war. With a strong company assembled of various individual traits, Jarel and Corvin trek across Ordia in hopes of returning it to a home of safety and comfort. So, that's kind of the introduction to that. So, I hope you guys grab a copy of that. I would greatly appreciate it. And I guess any other closing stuff that I would probably like to mention is that, yes, I've finished college, and for the most part, I should have more time to record my Tolkien episodes. So I guess just be on the lookout for more episodes, hopefully weekly. I want to say hopefully weekly, but we'll see. Thanks to all of the new YouTube subscribers, viewers, all that stuff. So, sorry again. So I guess I can just close with that for now, is that for YouTube, be sure to subscribe to my channel, obviously. Actually, it would probably be here? Somewhere here. Yeah, here. What was I saying? Subscribe to my channel. Like the video if you like what I'm doing here. Comment, obviously, to see how I'm doing everything right or everything wrong. probably the latter. And just keep listening for more episodes. So with everything and all that being said, stay tuned for the next episode. And may the light of Elbereth be with you all. Farewell!